Part 40. The favorite of the Nongmen group, the female supporting role is a full-level boss. Author, Ruan Meng Bao. Chapter 391. Gu Beizu was afraid that once her secret thoughts were exposed, everything would change, and in the end, even siblings would be unable to make love, so she wanted to stay away from him when she knew her thoughts. But she was so hopeless that he arranged for someone to pick her up. He said that one of the sleeves of the clothes she had made was not finished, so he entered the palace without any backbone. It has been delayed until now, when the Queen Mother is going to draft him. Gu Beizu makes up her mind to leave the capital and return to Xinghua village, not seeing or hearing about him, so that as time goes by, she can forget about him. She is just a sister who is not related by blood. It would be inappropriate for Gigi to stay in the palace. We are free to marry in our family. As long as it suits you and treats you well, no matter what your background is. Suwon saw through it without saying it. Adolescent boys and girls get along with each other every day, and it is inevitable that they will develop feelings for each other. Gu Beizu didn't say anything, so she couldn't ask more questions, and she didn't know how to give advice. After all, she didn't know what Jingyun was thinking. She would find time to ask Jingyun what he meant. Gu Beizu smiled and rolled up her sleeves. Sister-in-law, let me help you. The aunt and sister-in-law cooked the dinner together and asked the maid to bring it to the 8 immortals' table. The two of them went to eat together hand in hand. Gu Huizi was sitting at the table wearing a blue gown. Gu's mother sat next to Mrsu and persuaded her to go back to the countryside with her to retire. Gu Jiaojiao was wearing a pink and white dress with 2 braids. She had big watery eyes, cherry red lips and white and tender cheeks. She looked cute. She sat next to Jishuo, taking his wrist and taking his pulse seriously, her 2 delicate eyebrows knotted. Jishuo had a smile on his lips and looked at her indulgently. What disease have you diagnosed? Gu Jiaojiao curled her lips and said, you are so angry. Turning around, she saw Suwon and Gu Beizu, and she smiled brightly. Mother. Auntie, ow. Jishuo grabbed her pigtails and said, come back. Gu Jiaojiao looked at Jishuo with tears in her eyes, full of accusations. Jishuo was stunned, as if he saw Gu Beizu when he was a child. He let go of his hand, turned to look at Gu Beizu who was hugging Gu Jiaojiao, and rubbed the center of his eyebrows with his slender fingers. It's time to eat, Suwon said to Jishuo, stay here tonight or go back to the palace. Jishuo didn't reply and looked at Gu Beizu. Gu Beizu knew that some words could not be avoided. She was not the kind of person to leave without saying goodbye. Maybe there were a lot of people, so Suwon stood behind her, giving her courage, and whispered, second brother, you can go back by yourself. I won't go back to the palace. Ask the maid to pack up the things and bring them to Gu's house. I'll go back to Xinghua village with my mother tomorrow. Jishuo's eyebrows were furrowed, and his thick ink-like eyes became sharp. He didn't respond to her words, but the cold air he released made Gu Beizu hang his head lower, feeling a little inexplicably guilty. Gu's mother said at the side, Jingyun, Beizu is a big girl. She will have haircuts soon. It's not appropriate to stay in the palace any longer. Then she turned to Suwon and said, Wan, you have good taste. If you think the man who comes to propose marriage is good, let's check it out. As soon as these words came out, there was silence in the room for a moment, and Mother Gu suddenly realized a problem. Huh? Beizu is already 15, and no one has come to propose marriage. Hearing this, Jishuo curled up his lips and said, maybe he is self-aware and cannot reach high. Suwon glanced at Jishuo specifically, and joked with a smile, Beizu and Jingyun are not siblings. She has been in the palace all the time, and the two of them have a good relationship. How can anyone dare to come to propose marriage? Maybe they think our family wants to. If you want to kiss more, don't touch the tiger's butt. The author has something to say. Woohoo, 10,000 words, not finished yet, there is still a little bit left. Crying. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. The favorite of the Nongmen group, the female supporting role is a full-level boss. Author, Ruan-Meng Baobao. Chapter 392. Just as Jishuo was about to say something, Mother Gu frowned. How can that be done? Don't make fun of me. Gu Beizu looked at Gu's mother's reaction and forced a smile. The food is almost cold, let's eat. Jishuo fell silent. Gu Huizi looked at the two people thoughtfully, met Suwan's sly eyes, understood, and only said, Mom, many times, things cannot be done by oneself, so don't be too pedantic. Mother Gu was silent for a while, then invited them to eat, then changed the topic. The Queen Mother told me a few days ago that she was going to audition for Jingyun. Gu's mother would not agree to let Gu Beizu enter the palace. One was the relationship between the two people. She couldn't overcome this hurdle in her heart. If the couple had relationship problems in the future, they would probably become strangers. One is that Jingyun is the emperor, and she does not want Gu Beizu to suffer this injustice. Gu Beizu and Jishuo remained silent throughout the dinner. After dinner, Jishuo left the table and returned to the backyard. Gu Beizu was not in the mood either, and after a while, he also stood up and left. He walked out of the main room and said to his maid, You go down and have a rest. You don't have to wait on me. The maids each went back to their own servant rooms to rest. Gu Beizu wanted to be alone for a while, so she walked through the backyard and returned to her house. The house was dark and quiet. She opened the door, held her wrist with one hand and pulled her in. Bang! The door closed and Gu Beizu was pushed against the door panel. She was so frightened that her heart almost jumped out of her throat. She opened her mouth to scream, but was blocked by two thin lips. Gu Beizu's eyes widened in shock. The familiar scent told her who this person was, and her mind went blank. Seeing that she didn't struggle, Jishuo tentatively took her soft lips and sucked them gently, then put his arms around her waist. Gu Beizu suddenly came to his senses, bit his lip, and pushed him away. But his waist was restrained by him, and Gu Beizu was so anxious that she was about to cry, we can't do this. Why not? Jishuo pinched her chin and forced her to raise her head. Seeing the tears in her eyes, his voice lowered involuntarily, You are pretending to be me. He pointed at her heart with his finger. Then moved to her eyes, It's the same here, why not? I didn't, well. Gu Beizu's jaw hurt from being pinched, and he couldn't say the next words. Jishuo leaned forward and said in her ear, Why do you think no one dares to come to propose marriage to you? He chuckled, It's exactly what my sister-in-law said. Gu Beizu looked at him in disbelief, not expecting that it was him who did it. How could you? The next moment, she shook her head again, No, you want to be drafted? There is no draft. I originally wanted to ask for my mother's permission before explaining my feelings to you. Jishuo thought of what she had said before, and his face darkened. You want to leave the capital and marry someone else? Gu Beizu was confused and didn't know how to answer. She had hoped countless times that he would also like her, the kind of love between a man and a woman, but after her wish came true, she was not happy, but only panicked, and her mind was filled with what her mother said during the dinner. Don't worry about mother. She doesn't want you to be wronged. Jishuo's slender fingers passed through her fingers and clasped tightly with hers. You have to understand that I will not allow you to marry to someone else. Even if you don't want to marry me, I will keep you in the palace until I grow old. Gu Beizu glared at him. Zuzu, you have to start and end everything you do. If you accompany me to the palace at the age of 10, you can't give up halfway. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The favorite of the Nongmen group, the female supporting role is a full-level boss. Author, Ruanmeng Baobao. Chapter 393. Gu Beizu really didn't want Ji Shuo to marry anyone else, and wanted to stay with him like that for the rest of his life, but he had some scruples in his heart. Ji Shuo knew the crux of her heart. Eldest brother obviously agrees with what my mother said. I won't force you to go to your mother now. If she agrees, you can't refuse me. Gu Beizu bit her lower lip, and when he leaned close to her lips, she shrank back in fear and said hurriedly, then go ahead. Ji Shuo laughed softly. Gu Beizu's face turned red and she struggled slightly. Ji Shuo didn't tease her, let go of his hand, and opened the door to find Gu's mother. Gu Beizu covered her hot cheeks with both hands, thinking that her girlish concern might be fulfilled, and she felt a sense of joy belatedly. She arranged her clothes and followed quietly to her mother's yard. An oil lamp was lit in the room, reflecting the shadows of Gu's mother and Ji Shuo on the window paper. The maid keeping watch at night stood at the door and wanted to say hello when she saw Gu Beizu. Gu Beizu raised her index finger to Yin Hong's lips, signaling the maid to silence. She sat on a stone bench in the yard and waited silently for them to finish their conversation. Gu's mother and Ji Shuo talked in the room for a long time, and it took about half an hour before the door opened again. Ji Shuo came out and saw Gu Beizu sitting in the yard. The smile in his eyes deepened and he walked towards her. He couldn't help but raise his hand and rub her head. You've been waiting for a long time. I've only been here for a while. The mist has wet your hair. Really? Gu Beizu raised her hand to touch her head, but was held by his hand. The palm was dry and warm. She realized that she had been deceived and glared at him. You bullied me again. I feel sorry for you. Ji Shuo looked at her red face and said warmly, you go back to Xinghua village with your mother, and I will pick you up when the time comes. Gu Beizu asked blankly, Mother, agreed. Ji Shuo said with a smile in his eyes, you talk to your mother, I'll go back to the palace first. Gu Beizu's mood went up and down, and she didn't have time to happily ask him what he had said to his mother before they were about to part ways. She answered subconsciously, ah. You want to go back to the palace. Ji Shuo touched her bright eyes, hiding loss and reluctance. He pinched her face helplessly, will I stay with you for a while longer? Government affairs are important, you go back to the palace first, and we can wait until you get back to talk about anything else. Gu Beizu is a person who knows the general situation and can distinguish what is important and what is important, and will not be too willful. We met every day before, and I haven't been with my mother for a long time, spend good time with her tonight. Ji Shuo wanted to go into the palace to discuss his and Gu Beizu's affairs with the Queen Mother in case the night was long and the dream was too much. Take care of yourself. Gu Beizu nodded, sent Ji Shuo to the carriage, and then returned to Gu's mother's yard. Gu's mother didn't sleep. She sat on the kong and sewed Gu Jiao's skirt, waiting for Gu Beizu to come and ask her something. Mother. Gu Beizu stood by the kong, looking at Gu's mother with peaceful eyebrows under the light. After all, she felt a little guilty. Have you promised your second brother? What else can I do if I don't agree? Your elder brother has already spoken for you. Gu's mother tied a knot in the thread and cut it with scissors. When she saw that the skirt that had been snagged by a branch was sewn up, she looked up at Gu Beizu. Have you thought about it? Gu Beizu wrung her fingers and nodded. It doesn't matter, children and grandchildren will have their own blessings. Gu's mother folded the skirt and put it aside, and said something ugly before. Jingyun said that now he has full wings, his left and right arms are all his own, and there is no need to take a concubine from the minister's family to stabilize him. Status, there will not be 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. But I want to tell you, you can only listen to the words of the moment, and cannot be used as a lifelong commitment. The years are still long, and people are still moving forward, and their vision and mind will change in the future. No one can tell what it will look like. Whether you can catch him and let him treat you like this for the rest of your life depends on your ability. I told Jingyun that if he wants to take a concubine in the future and you can't bear it and are unwilling to stay with him any longer, I will allow your elder brother to take you back to the house. Gu's mother didn't want to see such a scene, because she was afraid that because of Gu Beizu, the relationship would become bad and they would become enemies. Ji Shuo said a lot, but Gu's mother was still afraid. After all, he was the emperor. What should he do if he wanted to touch the Gu family in the future? She was finally moved by Ji Shuo's words, "Mother, my current status is because of my eldest brother. He is now the chief minister and in charge of the official department. No one in the court dares to offend him and is more afraid of him than they are of me. Sister-in-law, the Charity Association, Women Medical Center, has a high reputation among the people, especially since she has a complete monopoly on the supply of medicinal materials to the army. The one who guards the border is General Qi Guangda, who is my elder sister-in-law. The only one who has good prospects is Zhao Qiagong. Wei, he still owes his sister-in-law a promise, and Tang Nuan is committed to her sister-in-law. Under this situation, it would be quicker for my elder brother to kick me out than to attack the Gu family. What you are thinking is also a problem that has troubled me. I can't guarantee whether I will always be of the same mind in the future, but I have offended Zuzu now, and I am willing to bear the price of losing her in the future." Gu Beizu suddenly felt uncomfortable and threw herself into Gu's mother's arms. "Mom, am I being selfish? One slap can't make a difference." Gu's mother hugged Gu Beizu, and she felt a little sour in her heart. She was obviously a little girl before, and she was about to get married in a blink of an eye. "You two are doing well. If it's your problem, mother won't allow it. Your elder brother will help you. If it's Jingyun's problem, if you want to go home, send a message to your elder brother and he will take you back." Tears rolled down from Gu Beizu's eyes. She hugged Gu's mother tightly and said firmly, "Mother, this is the path I have chosen. Even if there are many obstacles on the road ahead, I will overcome all difficulties and never look back. Adding chaos to our family. She can bear any outcome in the future, good or bad. Everyone must be responsible for their own choices. Even if she loses the bet, she cannot involve her eldest brother and sister-in-law." Ji Shuo returned to the palace and went directly to Xi'an Palace. The Queen Mother was still copying scriptures. When she heard the maid's announcement, she put down her control and took the hot handkerchief handed by the maid to wipe her hands. "Shuo-er, you're back." The Empress Dowager stood up with the help of her maid, and asked with a smile, "Didn't you say you have to stay one night before returning to the palace?" "Mother, I have something to discuss with you." Ji Shuo looked serious. The Queen Mother stared at him for a while, the smile on her face faded, as if she had anticipated what he was going to say. She sat in the chair and waved away the maids in the palace. There were only mother and son in the huge dormitory. He knelt on the ground and said, "I want to marry Beizu as my queen, but she is the only one in the harem." The Queen Mother fell into silence. "There are many women, and there are many right and wrongs. If the late emperor only had you as his queen, his brother would not have died young, and you would not have been separated from your sons and daughters. Mother, you have suffered greatly from this, and you should deeply hate 3 wives and 4 concubines." Ji Shuo gave a negative example. "What if my son is addicted to women and stops doing his job and becomes a coward?" The Empress Dowager laughed angrily. "Don't you know that everyone has one standard for themselves and another for others?" "Oh, it's the double standards," Wan Wan said. "I hate your father deeply, and I hope he only has a woman from the AI family. Similarly, as your mother, the AI family hopes that you will marry more women to consolidate your status and spread your branches." "Ji Shuo," he said helplessly, "Mother, you understand what I mean." The Queen Mother took a sip from a glass of water and said calmly, "You should know the problems you will face after marrying Beizu. You are worried about the exclusive power of your relatives, but you must also know that without the eldest brother and the others, there would be no achievements today for the sons and ministers, and there would be no prosperity for the Zhou dynasty today. If he wanted this position, it would be him, not the son, who is sitting in this position now. Chen Jishuo got a little excited when he said this, and his eyes turned red. Do you know why the eldest brother insists on having only one child for Jiao Jiao and is unwilling to have a second child? The Empress Dowager was stunned and seemed not to have thought about the hidden meaning of this matter. However, after Jishuo mentioned it, she was shocked. The favorite of the Nongmen group, the female supporting role is a full-level boss. Author, Ruan Meng Baobao. Chapter 394. Since ancient times, we have been most afraid of those with high achievements. Gu Huizi wanted to make the royal family feel at ease. His achievements, his character, and the sons he fathered were by no means mediocre. Because of brotherly love, Jishuo would not be afraid of him or restrict him. But it's hard to predict whether the next emperor will also trust the Gu family and be willing to reuse the Gu family. Whenever the emperor has other ideas, it will be a disaster for the Gu family. If Gu Huizi had only one daughter, the situation would be different. Especially if Gu Beizu marries Jishuo, I am afraid that Gu Huizi will not have another child. People's hearts are unpredictable. The Empress Dowager originally liked Gu Beizu, but she also had a lot of scruples that prevented her from thinking about making them a couple. Now that Jishuo was talking about this, what else could she say? Marrying a wife means living with you, you can make your own decision. The Empress Dowager did not interfere much. My dear, thank you, Queen Mother. Jishuo showed a happy smile, showing the vitality he deserved at his age. The corners of the Queen Mother's lips slowly raised, revealing a shallow smile. That's all, children and grandchildren will have their own blessings. The next day, at dawn, Gu's mother had just finished breakfast and packed her things to set off. At this time, an imperial edict came from the palace, appointing Gu Beizu as his fiancée, and the wedding date was chosen by the Kintian supervisor. After a night of digestion, Gu's mother accepted the matter and was sincerely happy. She gave the servant a generous reward and sent him out respectfully. She said to Gu Beizu, who was holding the imperial edict, "You will come with me to Xinghua village this time, and then come to Beijing after the wedding date is down." Gu Beizu opened her mouth to agree, but thinking of Jishuo's words, she whispered, "Mom, he said he would send someone to take me to Beijing after the Mid-Autumn Festival." Young girls can't help themselves. Gu's mother teased Gu Beizu, "Have you packed everything?" "All right." Gu's mother nodded and said to Suwan, "When you have time, come to Xinghua village to stay for a while. If you get busy, ask someone to bring Jiao Jiao to me." "Grandma, I will miss you," Gu Jiao Jiao said sweetly, "I will visit you often." Okay, Grandma will buy you some snacks." Gu's mother hugged Gu Jiao Jiao, kissed and praised her, and took her with her for several years. When they were parted, she felt very reluctant to part with her. She wiped her tears and said, "Grandma also often come and see Jiao Jiao." Tears welled up in Gu Jiao Jiao's dark and translucent eyes. She hugged Gu's mother and said softly, "After I learn medical skills from my mother, I will live with you in Xinghua village and take care of you." These words made Gu's mother almost burst into tears that she had been holding back. Mother Gu didn't like the sadness of parting, so she let go of Gu Jiao Jiao, and took Gu Beizu and Mrs. Su into the carriage with her baggage. Madame Su wanted to visit Xinghua village, where Suwan lived and where she became famous. Suwan took Gu Jiao Jiao's hand and walked them to the door, watching the carriage slowly drive away. Gu Jiao Jiao shook Suwan's arm. "Mom, when will we return to Xinghua village?" "Go back in 2 days." Suwan pinched her chubby cheeks. "Do you recognize all the herbs?" "I recognized it all when I was 3 years old." "Are you able to memorize the medicinal properties?" "Recite it like a stream." "Recite it to me." Gu Jiao Jiao said crisply, "Mom, please give birth to a little brother or sister. Aren't you afraid of sharing favors?" Gu Jiao Jiao pouted, That's not sharing favors, that's sharing my nightmares. One more person will torture you. Mom just likes you and doesn't want to see you again. You just have to accept my mother's deep love for you. Suwon picked up Gu Jiaojiao and said with a smile, let's go to the study to endorse. Gu Jiaojiao saw her father coming back and shouted, Dad! Dad! Help me! Your mother is just teasing you. Gu Huizi walked over and took Gu Jiaojiao from Suwon's hand. We are leaving today to return to Xinghua village. Suwon was stunned. Didn't you say that it would take 2 days? I have never accompanied you mother and daughter on a long trip. Let's take our time to travel back and arrive at Xinghua village in time for the Mid-Autumn Festival. Gu Jiaojiao jumped for joy. Suwon also thought this was a good idea, so she immediately packed up her suitcases and set off together. Little did they know that Gu Beizu was elected as the queen. Although people in the capital felt sorry for her, they had already accepted her fate. There was a boy in the family who was about the same age as Gu Jiaojiao and set his sights on her. Mid-Autumn Festival, a day for family reunion. Gu Huizi, Suwon, and Gu Jiaojiao's family took a carriage to Xinghua village. They didn't notify Mother Gu in advance because they wanted to give them a surprise. The carriage stopped at the entrance of the village. Gu Huizi got out of the carriage first, carried Suwon out of the carriage, and then took Gu Jiaojiao down. Gu Jiaojiao came to Xinghua village for the first time. She looked around curiously and found that the entire village was dotted with courtyards with blue bricks and white walls. It doesn't look like a village at all, and it's richer than some of the small towns along the way. She marveled in her heart that these changes were all due to her mother's influence, and she admired her mother even more in her heart. Huizi? Wan, when the neighbors came back from working in the fields and saw this family of 3, they didn't dare to recognize them. Sister-in-law Lin Gu Huizi and Suwon responded. Oh, it's really you. Sister-in-law Lin looked at Gu Jiaojiao with a smile on her face. The little girl is Jiaojiao, right? She's so pretty. Your father talks about her in the village all day long. Today when I saw it, she looked like a little fairy girl. And, my grandfather rarely sees me, but in his heart I am the best. Gu Jiaojiao smiled sweetly and said, my parents said that Xinghua village is now prosperous and lives a better life than many people in the capital. Today I see, it's true. When sister-in-law Lin heard that their life was better than that of some people in the capital, she smiled from ear to ear. She took out a handful of dried fruits from her pocket and stuffed them into Gu Jiaojiao's hands. Stay here longer, come to my aunt eat at home. Thank you, aunt, I will go. Gu Jiaojiao put the dried fruits in her pocket. Sister-in-law Lin exchanged a few pleasantries and went home with her hoe. When she met some neighbors on the road, she announced that Gu Huai's family of 3 was back. The little girl in his family was plump and beautiful, and her mouth was as sweet as honey. If you give up Suwon, you will be a blessed person from now on. To her neighbors, Suwon was the god of wealth who made them rich. When she heard that she was back, she was so enthusiastic about bringing food from home to the Gu family. Gu Huizi and Suwon didn't know that they originally wanted to surprise Gu's mother, but they didn't know that there was a bigger surprise waiting for them at home. The family of 3 walked slowly to the door of Gu's courtyard. The neighbors came out after putting things away at Gu's house, greeted Suwon and Gu Huizi, and praised Gu Jiaojiao. Today is the Mid-Autumn Festival. It's time for dinner. You should hurry in and eat. Our neighbors won't disturb your families reminiscing about old times. The village will host a banquet tomorrow and treat your family to dinner. Huizi would like to thank all the villagers here. Gu Huizi thanked him and watched the villagers leave. Suwon and Gu Jiaojiao pushed open the courtyard door, and the scene in the courtyard came into view unexpectedly. The family of 3 stopped at the door. The author has something to say. If nothing else, it will be finished in just 1 chapter. Ruin Bayo will not go into details about the emotional dramas of other supporting characters. There are too many characters. It is enough for everyone to know that they are all perfect, okay. The favorite of the Nongmen group, the female supporting role is a full-level boss. Author, Ruan Meng Baobao. Chapter 395. Chapter 395 Final Chapter. There were 2 earthen stoves built in the yard, and 2 large pots were placed on them. Gu's mother and Gu Qingsong were in charge of the pots, and they controlled one of the earthen stoves respectively. Chi Min, Cao Wangking, and Tang Nuan were standing on a long chopping board cutting vegetables. Ji Xian, Xie Wei, and Zhao Wei rolled up their sleeves and squatted by the well to wash vegetables. Gu Beizu took out the dishes and chopsticks from home and placed them on the table. 2 little carrots were crawling around on the turf under a peach tree. Mrs. Su took care of them with a smile. This busy scene is full of fireworks. Su Wan's eyes couldn't help but feel sore as she looked at it. All her relatives and friends gathered together during the Mid-Autumn Festival, and no one was separated. Wan, Huizi, Xiao, you and your family of 3 are finally here. Chi Min, Ji Xian, Cao Wangking, Xie Wei, Tang Nuan, and Zhao Wei all put down their work and walked towards the door. We thought you suddenly changed your plans and wouldn't come to Xinghua village to celebrate the festival together. Chi Min stood in front of Su Wan, with a smile on her rosy cheeks. She knelt down and picked up Gu Jiao. Fortunately you arrived, otherwise the surprise is all in vain. Jiao, don't you think so? Gu Jiao hugged Chi Min's neck. Grandma, no, in the hearts of parents, family members are the most important. She pursed her lips and kissed Chi Min on the face. Jiao misses you so much. Ji Xian asked, do you only want grandma? I think about it. I think about it very much every night. Gu Jiao stretched out her hand for Ji Xian to hug him and kissed him on the cheek. I think about the stories about killing enemies told by my grandfather. Chi Min teased her, grandma can also speak it. I'm sleeping with my grandpa and grandma tonight. You guys tell me stories. Okay, Jiao sleep with us. Chi Min came down and said to Su Wan and Gu Huizi, you are here, let's work together. Su Wan. Gu Huizi. Is this because there are grandchildren, and my daughter and son-in-law are being criticized? Cao Wangking said gently, the vegetables are washed and cut, just waiting to be put into the pot. Gu's mother's voice came in and said, no need to cook, let's eat hot pot. This is what Wan has researched. It tastes particularly good when eaten occasionally. It's suitable for eating when there are many people. It's lively and saves trouble. Su Wan took Cao Wangking's arm, looked at Chi Min and complained, concubine, we don't know how to do this anymore. We only bring back a mouth and we know how to eat. Eat more. Chi Min touched her face and said distressedly, I have lost weight. Before, when I was running outside, I would inevitably lose weight. Now that I can relax, I will be able to gain weight in a short time. Su Wan and several female relatives sat together at the 8 Immortals table to reminisce about the past. She looked at Cao Wangking's belly and saw that she was probably 4 or 5 months pregnant. Do you have morning sickness? Cao Wangking shook her head and stroked her belly. The child is very good. I can eat and drink, and I am not tired at all. Su Wan glanced at Xie Wei, who was sitting at the next table and talking to Gu Huizi. His hair was shorter than that of other men and trimmed like a modern suit. He leaned into Cao Wangking's ear and said, when are you going to do it? Agree to marry him. Cao Wangking smiled and said, I really wanted to marry him before. After going through so many things, I think this is good. The 2 of us have a good relationship and don't care about a formal wedding. If the relationship fades, a wedding can't hold it back. Su Wan couldn't help but sigh. Cao Wangking stayed with Xie Wei for nearly a year and helped her clear all the land for growing medicinal materials. The relationship between them became subtle. It's just that Xie Wei is not an ordinary man. He is a chess fanatic, and he grew up in a temple. He has his own goals and is very determined. He just has a good impression of Cao Wangking, but Cao Wanking has deep feelings for him. If the two people continue to be entangled like this, I'm afraid Siebwe will surrender. However, an accident occurred at this time. Cao Wanking's mother died of illness. She returned to her grandfather's house to deal with her mother's funeral. After the burial, Cao Wanking wrote a letter to Siebwe and stayed in Jinzhou to honor her mother. After leaving Rikiao, she did not receive a letter from Siebwe. She only received a letter from the eldest princess, saying that Siebwe was going to be ordained. Cao Wanking rushed to the temple where he became a monk, and Siebwe knelt in front of the Buddha. The abbot had already tonsured him, but the abbot said that he had an unfinished relationship with the world, so he did not give him any scars. Cao Wanking looks very gentle and does things by the rules, but Siebwe is the only thing she does that goes out of the way. She stayed in the temple and copied scriptures for her mother to observe mourning for 3 years. And she only gave herself these 3 years. If she still couldn't get Siebwe to return to secular life for her, she would give up completely. When the 3 years were up, she went to find Siebwe, who persuaded her to go down the mountain. She was living in poverty in the temple and it was in vain for her to stay here. Cao Wanking said, "Siebwe, you haven't had your ring scar yet because your mortal bond is over. Your mortal bond is me, right? I'm a weak woman, lonely and helpless. Let's do this, you send me back to Jinzhou, and between us made a break." Siebwe agreed. He practiced ascetic meditation and sent Cao Wanking back to Jinzhou on foot. Some accidents happened on the way, and the two became married. However, Cao Wanking did not hold him responsible for this incident. Instead, she left Siebwe and bought a small courtyard to live in Jinzhou. 3 months later, Siebwe came to live next door to her. When Suwan heard Cao Wanking talking about the entanglement between the two people, it was calm and gentle, but the ups and downs in it were hard to experience personally if she wasn't there. Just as she was about to say something, Cao Wanking leaned into her ear and said, "It's okay if he is always ruthless to me. Because he is affectionate for me, he would be unwilling to give up just like that. It is his affection that makes me. I have been chasing him for 4 years. I am very cautious and don't want him to get his wish easily and experience the suffering I suffered." Suwan laughed. This was the fun between the two people. He is a single-minded person. I often wonder if it was because of the accident that he came to see me. Cao Wanking's clear eyes were open-minded, showing her relief about this matter. "I don't want to. It doesn't matter what the reason is, as long as he treats me well and keeps me in his heart. Let's wait until the child is born. Then I'll ask you to comb my bridal hair." "Okay, I'm waiting for your good news." Suwan put her arms around Cao Wanking and said softly, "You will be happy for the rest of your life." Cao Wanking hugged her back. "I thought so too." Sister Wan Wan, Tang Nuan sat aside and looked at Suwan eagerly. "I want to eat the oven-roasted chicken you made." Suwan turned around, looked at Tang Nuan's rounded face, pinched her cheeks, and teased, "You are already a mother of 2 children, and you are still so greedy." Tang Nuan's cheeks were red. She didn't want to have a baby so early. But after accompanying Zhao Wei to the border pass, the wind and sand were too strong and the climate was very dry. Sister Qin couldn't adapt to it, so she wanted to take Sister Qin away from the border pass and go out for some travel. She had been insinuating in front of Zhao Wei, and he seemed unhappy. Tang Nuan was heartbroken and wore the clothes Suwan gave her, and they became a real couple that night. They coaxed Zhao Wei into agreeing on the bed, and the next day she took Sister Qin to play. Zhao Wei arranged for people to protect them along the way. When they finally passed through Jiangnan, Sister Qin liked the water town there very much and bought a house to settle down. She found out that she was pregnant and returned to the border. "This time, I will hold 2 in 3 years." Tang Nuan became more and more shy, her eyes were moist. She put her hand on her lower abdomen and said softly, "It's not that I'm greedy, it's the little guy in my belly who wants to eat." Suwon was confused. She was pregnant again? Third child. Tang Nuan nodded. The military doctor said there may be 2 babies. Suwon quickly checked Tang Nuan's pulse. Good guy, there are really 2 of them. But she was so envious. Suwon looked at Gu Huizi at the next table with resentment. If Gu Huizi realized something, he raised his eyes and looked at his wife, gouging him out with a smile on his lips. He didn't know what he did wrong. Suwon gave him another big eye roll, turned around, and said to Tang Nuan, Nuan, take good care of yourself. After you give birth, I will be their godmother. She stood up and said, I'll go and bake the cake for them. Chicken, what else do you want to eat? Tang Nuan shook his head. This is the dish, my aunt made me Westlake vinegar fish. Okay, Suwon rolled up her sleeves and started cooking. This reunion was premeditated and they deliberately hid it from Gu Huizi and Suwon. Gu Qingsong counted the number of people and made a particularly large round tabletop, covering it on the 8 immortals table, and everyone sat around the table. A short and small stove was placed in the middle of the table, with a small iron pot on it. They cut long bamboo skewers, skewered the vegetables and cooked them in the pot, just like modern skewers. This time we have traveled thousands of miles to gather together. I only hope that this friendship can last for a long time. In the next 5 or 10 years, we will have to open a table for the children and let everyone lively together. Suwon stood up holding the wine glass and said to Cao Wonking and Tang Nuan, you use goat's milk instead of wine. Everyone looked at each other and smiled, and said in unison, in these prosperous times, we get together once a year. Very good, very good. Suwon smiled broadly and drank the drink in one gulp. I haven't been so happy for a long time. The smell of alcohol made her cheeks turn red. It would be better if Jingyun is here. As soon as he finished speaking, the courtyard door opened, and Ji Shuo stood at the door dusty. He looked at the people sitting around the table. The table was steaming hot and exuding the aroma of delicious food. The tiredness in his brows and eyes dissipated, adding a bit of warmth. I came at the right time. When everyone saw him, they quickly prepared to stand up and salute. Ji Shuo raised his hand to stop him. I am just the son of the Gu family today. I have no other identity. Don't let anyone know about it. He walked directly to Gu Beizu. Gu Qingsong brought him bowls and chopsticks. He poured a glass of wine and raised his glass. I'm late today, I punish myself with 3 drinks. He drank 3 glasses of wine generously. This move instantly shortened the distance between them, and there was no distinction between monarch and minister. Gu's mother asked, why are you here? You have to spare time and stay up for a few more days and nights to deal with government affairs, right? Today is a day for family reunion. I can't be absent. Ji Shuo poured a glass of fruit wine for Gu's mother. The queen is in charge of the palace, so don't worry. Mother Gu felt relieved. The dinner table became lively. Everyone talked about daily life, people's livelihood, and the situation in the court. Suwon drank a few glasses of wine and became a little drunk. She leaned her head on Gu Huizi's shoulder, put a hand on his palm, put her fingers through his fingers, and looked at the people talking and laughing on the table. She saw Xie listening to other people's conversation, but his eyes were on Cao Wonking. Whichever dish she looked at, he would put it into a bowl for her, taking care of it very carefully and thoughtfully, with tender affection in his eyes. Zhao Wei's child, a 3.5-year-old boy, eats obediently by himself, and he provides food to the child from time to time. A 2.5-year-old girl sat in his arms. He fed her food 1 bite at a time, and also took care of Tang Nuan beside her, telling her not to eat cold or spicy food. Tang Nuan stared at him with watery eyes and tugged on his sleeve. Zhao Wei's stern face softened and he allowed her to eat a little. Tang Nuan's eyes suddenly lit up, and she started eating happily while holding the bowl. The corners of Zhao Wei's mouth raised slightly, and his eyes were full of helplessness. He said it was just a little, but it was left to her. Mother Gu took care of Mrs Su and Gu Jiao, while Gu Qingsong took care of her silently. Mother Gu looked at the bowl filled with her favorite dishes, smiled at Gu Qingsong, and thanked her. Gu Qingsong said nothing, just pushed a glass of goat's milk in front of her and ate quietly. Suwan saw that Mother Gu's eyes seemed to have some feelings, and there was a faint flash of water. Ji Xian picked up a piece of fish, removed the spines, and put it into Qi Min's bowl. But Qi Min peeled off the shells of the shrimp and put them in Ji Xian's bowl. The couple looked at each other and smiled. Gu Huizi knew that Suwan liked to eat chicken legs, but didn't like to chew them. He cut off the chicken with a knife and put it in her bowl. "What are you looking at?" Suwan murmured, "I think this is the happiest moment." The dim lights shone on everyone's faces, the smiles were all warm, and the soup was bubbling in the iron pot. Such a quiet and leisurely life, so happy and beautiful, was like a rich and colorful painting. Suwan felt peaceful as she had never felt before. Relatives, friends, lovers, and children were all around her. She truly had a sense of belonging in this world. "Huizi, I suddenly felt that Jiao would be too lonely alone." Suwan put a hand on his shoulder, with a pink face and a smile. Jiao said softly in his ear, "Let's meet again. Want a child?" She didn't want to think about all the troubles, she just wanted to go with her heart and do what she wanted to do. Gu Huizi's eyebrows were filled with the tenderness of time. He wiped the wine stains from the corners of her lips with a handkerchief, and gently pressed a kiss to the corners of her lips. "According to your..." Suwan laughed, and the laughter in her ears seemed to fade away with his words. She heard the sound of drums in her ears, singing, "It is better to drink wine and grow old together with your son. With the harp at your disposal, it is better to be quiet." In the golden light, Suwan saw a book appearing in front of her. She quickly turned the pages in front of her eyes. What was contained in it was no longer the tragic life story she saw when she traveled through time, but the life she rewrote and wrote. May she live a happy life full of children and grandchildren. Babies, this Nongmen article, after 214 days of serialization, draws a successful conclusion at this moment. Although the story is over, the lives of the characters in the story continue. Ahem, there were too many things last year. It took so long to write this story. Ruinbao feels very ashamed. I am very grateful to the babies who have accompanied Ruinbao all the way. Thank you very much for your support. I love you, but be careful, we will meet again if we are destined. 3.